Okay, so my name is Mrs. Clayton, and the other person who does this is Mr. Noak, and it's just me this evening to talk you through some of these pictures and the text that I'm going to talk to you about this evening. So geography is an A level, and we have two sides of geography. We have physical and human. And one of the things that we do is obviously we split it into year 12 and year 13. So we'll have a look at the core content in year 1. So in year 1, the year is split into sort of two bits that we think about. So Mr. Noak is teaching physical geography at the moment, and he starts off with talking about tectonic processes and hazards, and he goes through all the different plates and all the different things that happen, how mountains are formed, and how volcanoes are formed and earthquakes, and all the different things that are related to that. And you go into lots of detail about specific case studies. The second topic, which has got an option to it, and we choose to do landscape system processes and change, and we go and look at coastal landscapes and change, purely for the fact that obviously we're on the Jurassic Coast, we've got lots of things that we can see, and we look at the landscape down by the coast, and we talk about lots of different things to do with that. So as you can see from my slides, you can see that in my lifetime, you can see that the coast has changed around the British Isles. The second side to it is the human side to it, which is taught by me, and we look at in the first year we look at two different sides. So we look at globalization, so how the world has shrunk, how it's got smaller, and how we see the world and where goods come from. So where have we got goods coming from that they didn't used to come from? How has the internet made the world totally smaller? And then we've got shaping places and diverse shaping places, and we choose the topic of diverse places. So diverse places is just looking at different areas of say London, the different boroughs, and we look at the different makeups of the different areas, the different religions, the different ethnicities. We do it for the USA, and we look at all these different places and how we can see in our area how things are actually working. We also look at in the second year, in physical geography, we look at the core contents, which is water cycles and water insecurity. So we have a look at rivers and seas, and we talk about how it all fits in together, and we think about all the different cycles that go into place within the water cycle. So as you can see on the slide, you can see that seas are getting smaller, and you can see that the idea that water is very insecure. How are we going to get that water? If sea level rise, what is going to happen? And we know that sea level rise is happening, so the idea of trying to change that is massive. The next bit, which is the option, is carbon cycles and energy security. So we think about the idea of what are we doing with carbon? How are we taking it out? Why are we burning so much fossil fuel? And how can we cycle that back into the ground to get rid of some of it and to lock it back up, put it into those carbon sinks again? In human geography, the second year we look at in year 13, we look at superpowers. And we look at superpowers and the whole idea of how it all works and comes together. So the idea that superpowers is something that for you and me, we probably think of the United States of America. But if you go back several years, you can think that we had the Cold War and the whole idea of the USSR, and that how that crumbled and how it was a failed superpower, and the whole idea of how has the USA still maintained its superpower status, and how have we got the EU that's coming up behind it, or even China, and how all those different bits play different parts. And we talk about BRICS, and we talk about mints. So we talk about Brazil and Russia, and we talk about India and China and South Africa. We talk about how all of those, how they could be superpowers and where they are coming from and how they are getting into the whole scale of dominating the world, if you like. And then the last bit that we have an option, and we choose to do migration, identity and sovereignty, and we look at where people are being pushed from and where they're being pulled to. So we look at the idea of refugees, and why would people want to come from maybe Asia and come over to the UK, or why they went over to Germany, what did Angela Merkel do, and the whole idea of the swathe of people coming across from different places. And, you know, why are people doing these things? And it's very interesting to get down into it and talk about the reasons why people move to different countries. And it's surprising what the pupils find out. Identity, we look at how people identify with their different backgrounds and how that all fits together with if you have migrated from somewhere, and then how you fit into a local community when you've moved to a different country. And then sovereignty, we look at the idea of how a country identifies with itself and how it is all encompassing in what it believes in, and the national identity with all of that. So in geography, there are 3 exams, and our 3 exams, the first one is the physical geography, and that's 30%, and that's an hour and 15 minutes, and it looks at the 4 topics throughout the 2 years, which is what you would expect. The second paper is the human geography paper, and that is the 2 years worth of work again, and that is an hour and 15 minutes, and that is also 30%. So when you look at that, you know, makes up the bulk of it. We also have paper 3. Now, paper 3 is an unseen paper, and it's actually made up of paper 1 and paper 2, and they don't know what's coming on it. There's lots of practice on this, so we look at the papers and we go through it. So some of the questions that we do throughout the year are actually taken off paper 3, and we look at those different aspects of how to answer the questions, which are normally assess and evaluate. We also look at within paper 3, we look at the ideas of math skills that we think about, and the whole idea of some of the tests that we have to do within geography. And the last bit to make it up, because paper 3 is only worth 20%, is the NEA. And the NEA is the non-examined assessment, which is 20% as well. And that's where pupils go off and they choose a project, and they decide what they want to do on any of the 4 topics that we've taught. So they can take a small amount of it. It's better if you take a small specific part of it, so you know exactly what your question is, and you go out and you work out what test you want to do to actually answer that question. And then you write it all down in a big coursework, and you hand it in, and then it's marked by me and Mr. Noak, and we then send it off, and it's all handed in that way. So that's the different bits to do with that. So we think of all the endless topics around here that you could do. This year, lots and lots of our pupils are doing things on coastal defences or coasts and erosion. We've had ones on air pollution. We've had pupils do them in different countries, and they've compared Spain and our local coast, and they've looked at 2 different regions. You can do absolutely anything that you feel that you can get data on that's going to be very, very useful to write some information about. And moving on from that, we've got specific requirements. So we need to have a GCSE grade 4 in English, and then we ask for geography or any other humanities subjects at a grade 5. So you don't have to partake in geography at GCSE. It's probably easier if you have done, but if you haven't, it doesn't matter. We can get you up to speed with doing that. So there you go. And then we talk about pathways for the future. So I've just put a couple of them down and the different areas you can go into. So with countryside, I always like to think about the idea of countryside, and you go into things like countryside management or landscape architecture, anything to do with that. Coastal management, weather, we can think about the idea of being a weather forecaster, or you could even go into something like climate change analysis or weather forecaster, or anything to do with that. Risk could be flood risk, looking at anything to do with how the environment might change, and maybe emergency planner or risk analysis, a flood modeler, anything to do with that. The next one's mapping. So we can think of anything to do with GIS and the idea of mapping. So you could go and work for the Ordnance Survey, and then you could go and do some of those lovely surveys that they do. Geoscience, where you can look at the idea of geology or be a hydrologist, and you can look at lots of different things within all of those. We've got lots of different jobs that link to geography totally. Development. So with development, you can think of the idea of response manager. There's lots of things you can do. Travel and tourism sort of says itself, but you could, be a travel writer. You don't have to go into something like a travel agent. The environment, lots of things to do with the environment, and the idea of maybe air quality analysis, definitely need that at the moment. Sustainability consultant, anything to do with recycling, very on the ball at the moment. Anything to do with that is definitely what the world needs at the moment. And then you've got the built environment, and with the built environment, you can think of being an architect or a quantity surveyor. Anything to do with that all links in with it. So the last thing I have to say is, if you have any questions, put it in the chat function and I'll go over to that in a second. If not, you've got my email, which is below, which is hclayton@corfhills.net. And thank you for listening. Please get in touch if you need anything. I'm going to stop the presentation so I can get into the chat function, because I can't do it from here at the moment for some reason, and I shall see if there's any questions. If not, I'm sure there's another one to go and listen to, and you can sign off, and thank you for listening.